Thank you for watching this light bite on the evolution of lighting. In this light bite, you will learn how energy-efficient lighting can help pave the way towards a more sustainable future. Today's presenter is Harry Verhaar, Head of Global Public and Government Affairs.
Welcome to this light bite on lighting, lighting from evolution to revolution. It is a pleasure to share some thoughts and reflections on past, but also on future developments and relevance of lighting with you today. One can say, and perhaps you recognize this, that many of the most important things in life we take for granted. And that is certainly so with light, because light has created life on Earth. Everything we do and everything we experience depends on light. Human evolution started with lighting. And if you take all evolution, if you compress it into 1 year, then even we started only at the very late in the evening of December 31st. Today, also looking at a number of the challenges which we will touch upon, it's also interesting to see that all the energy we use started with light. So fossil fuels that are being discussed on their relevance originate from sunlight from the past. Whereas we want to move to fuels that are generated by the sunlight of today and of the future. In that sense, when you look at light and human evolution, we see, of course, that human evolution started accelerating when people invented fire. It gave them a way to prepare different foods, and it gave them a way to start moving around the planet and to evolve. From fire, we moved to modern artificial light. And it's not that much more than a century ago that we were for the first time able to light our environments where we live, work and leisure with artificial electrical light. If you look at human society, maybe to take a step back in history, it's only 200 years ago in 1800 when human population crossed the 1 billion people mark. And interestingly, only 3%, 30 million, so maybe twice the urban agglomeration of London lived in cities, and 97% of people were urban. This year, 2015, 54% of people live in cities, 3.5 billion. And if we look into the future, then until 2050, the global population will grow from about 7.4 to 9.5 billion. But at the same time, close to 3 billion more people will move into urban environments, almost doubling the, let's say, the urban space as compared to today. Then light in comparison to science. It's a bit longer ago than that we have artificial light, that the science of light originated. And that is also the reason that the United Nations, led by UNESCO, has declared 2015 the International Year of Light. Because it was in the year of 1015 that a famous Arab scientist, Ibn al-Haytham, wrote his book of optics. And he was the first person in history who described light as a phenomenon of wavelengths. And this created a lot of excitement in what they call the Islamic Golden Age. It's really interesting to look at what happened in those days. And then about 200 years ago, Fresnel looked more into the nature of light in their wavelengths. A bit shorter ago, all science evolved on magnetic waves that are used for so many applications today. And 100 years ago, you can say that Einstein looked a lot at light, and not only in his famous equation, where energy is the product of mass times the light speed in square, but also many other things that he did. And then light in many areas where we communicate, light fibers, communication, smartphones, you name it. And that is also something that makes light maybe something that we take for granted, but that is really so intrusive and so important to everything we do. So back to the birth of the first electric light source in the late 19th century. Interestingly, that also brought about the creation of Philips, of our company. And as we see today, heavy competition emerging, many new upstarts in the thousands upstarts working on LEDs. Exactly the same thing was happening 100 years ago. There were hundreds, there were thousands of companies making incandescent light bulbs. And it was also the first mass electric appliance. So beyond incandescent light bulbs, no other electric product, no other electric mass product existed. So no shavers, no blenders, no mixers, no televisions, no radios. Really the very first product. So symbolic and important to human progress. If you look at the evolution from there on, things continued to accelerate. So in the decades after the incandescent light bulb, we saw several families of gas discharge lamps being created that saw the light of day. So fluorescent lighting in many forms and shapes, important for today's office and industry lighting and some other applications. High-intensity discharge lights, which still abundantly light our streets and retail environments. But then also right now we see an even faster, things keep accelerating, revolution in the LED technology space. Looking at efficiencies, also on a logarithmic scale, it wouldn't even fit on one slide, but you see that from a original efficiency with incandescent light bulbs of a mere 10 lumens per watt, that we are now talking about 200 lumens per watt for LED lighting. So double or triple what is possible with the most modern lamp and vacuum-based lighting technologies. So quite impressive. So, in short, looking at past and the recent present, light is everywhere. It is where we live. Our food depends on it. It's how we communicate. It's how we study science in the areas of healthcare and education. You name it. But then still, something needs to change. We see, particularly since 10 years ago, an enormous discussion that has started to evolve on global challenges and constraints that we face in the way we live. If we look back just 10 years ago, which is also when we enhanced our actions and our efforts on energy efficiency, you see that 10 years ago it was really world headline news when at those days the first real science-based studies came out on global warming. Also, people looked into what is all relevant in terms of energy prices, energy shortages, the melting of the polar ice caps and so forth. And that is very much so, again, headline news today with COP21, the UN Climate Change Conference in December in Paris this year. So at the time, a little over 10 years ago, we started also looking how can lighting, which has been so important over history, how can we also in this case be part of the solution? We made a whole analysis of let's say, the global installed lighting base, and we concluded there that lighting consumes about 19% of global electricity. It's the largest homogeneous sector in terms of electricity consumption. And there's more reasons only than climate change to move to more efficient lighting. We see that 2/3 of all lighting installed is inefficient. And next to climate change, rising energy prices are an important reason to reduce consumption, because those are really a burden on national budgets, on cities, households, and corporate budgets. For a city, for instance, 50% of a city's energy budget is lighting for public offices, for schools, and for outdoor lighting. That can be reduced by 2/3 or more if you move to better technologies. We, and particularly here where we sit, are knowledgeable about security of energy supply. And quite often, as developed countries, we then look at our growing dependency on fossil fuel imports. But equally, there are many more emerging and developing countries that are looking, do we have enough electricity to power our growing economies 24 hours, 7 days a week? And then a fourth driver for change is economic growth. If we become more efficient, simply our products and solutions become more competitive. If we do more on energy efficiency, we create jobs and people renovating infrastructure, and we reduce the budget pressure by lowering energy budgets. So that is why on 7 December 2006, so time flies, this is really 10 years ago almost, that we called for a global phase out of incandescent light bulbs. And at the time, it's hard to imagine now, but at the time 2/3 of our global annual sales volume in lighting products was incandescent light bulbs, so just 9-10 years ago. And it was also the first time that a company did something like calling for the phase out, the global phase out through legislation of the product that it was founded with. And then, having said that, also phasing out the first mass electric appliance. So both symbolic, but also very impactful, given the relevance of energy consumption from lighting. After that, because this was the first time that a company did something like that and followed very quickly on as a whole global lighting sector, this was really headline news. It was staggering. It appeared on the internet. It appeared in all newspapers, magazines, Time magazine. I remember vividly how this was the talk of the day. And quite quickly in the years thereafter, most OECD countries followed. Europe, North America, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Australia, New Zealand, they all followed. And we can see that also when we look at a world map on phasing out incandescent light bulbs. And interestingly, reflecting on the 4 drivers for change, they were all addressed in Europe, but then Europe's umbrella name for the package in which this was included was the climate change package. But in the same year, 2007, in the US also legislation was adopted to phase out incandescent light bulbs, but then it was called the Energy Independence and Security Act. So you can see a different political angle, but in essence, in both cases, energy efficiency being the solution to the issues addressed. Since then, we also looked at how can we now also support emerging and developing countries, and knowing that for them this is even more important, not only because the global south will be more heavily impacted by the effect of climate change, but also for countries with lower income and aspirations to grow their economy, energy is simply a larger part of all of their budgets. So it makes even more sense to reduce that. And that is when, together with UNEP, United Nations Environmental Programme, we co-founded what is now known as the Enlighten project. And that is a project where today 66 emerging and developing countries in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East and Asia, and in the Pacific are a partner. And we are there with a wide multi-stakeholder team helping them to define the policies, to share the case studies, to find the business models, to do exactly that, transitioning in their lighting markets, and actually more and more talk us about leapfrogging to LED lighting solutions, so skipping some of the classical lamp and vacuum-based lighting technology that have been so dominant in the past decades in Europe, US, and some other countries. So looking now towards the future, so what does this mean? Where does light connected to some of the biggest challenges in the future? And you could say that all in all, there are 3 huge challenges that we are faced with across the globe. So one is population growth. We are currently at 7.4 billion people, growing 70 million people a year, so that by mid-century we will be at 9.5 and some fear even close to 10 billion people. Urbanization. Today, 3.5 billion people, 54% of population, live in cities. And that number will grow to close to 70%, so you would say 54 to 70%. Okay, that's not that much. But also coupled to population growth, it means that about 3 billion more people will go urban, so requiring almost a doubling of urban infrastructure. And then furthermore, 3 more billion people aspire to become part of the middle class. And rightly so. So who would we be to deny people the quality of life that so many of us already enjoy today? But these 3 factors combined actually underpin even more than the challenges of today, that we need to change the way we power, the way we grow, the way we develop our economies, because they impact the 4 major resources that we use today. So that is not only energy, but also materials, raw materials, food and water. In our case, we would particularly like to reflect on lighting, because these 3 global trends result in a growth in light points alone until 2030 of 70%. And the same effects you see when you model the growth of air conditioning, kitchen appliances, televisions, you name it. So that means that those appliances need to become more efficient, vastly more efficient, but also we need to make them smart so that they only consume energy and they only produce the service that they are intended for when this is needed. So maximizing benefits and also maximizing economy on energy. A bit of a broader picture is what does it mean for the challenges we face. And the broader picture is that this is part, this whole LED revolution, of a global paradigm change from a linear to a circular society. Because you could say that over the past few decades, we have optimized a linear society focused on lowest initial cost, price tag focus in our behavior, but also many of the processes that are in place, public procurement, looking at lowest initial cost, the way we judge things as voters, as electorate, as consumers, and that has really optimized the linear society where we extract, where we consume, and where we dispose. If I were to tell you that only 2% of all the energy that we consume is turned into the service that it is needed for, and 98% of all the energy is wasted. Well, if you turn that around, it also means that saving energy, doing things smarter and more economical, is actually the biggest opportunity that we have ever faced. So we need to move to a circular society, where we look at life cycle performance and life cycle economics of the things we do. And actually, it's good to mention that in the recent past there was a webinar by Nick Kelso on circular economy, where you can learn more on the relevance, but also the way to move forward on circular economy models. Then, so how does lighting move in? So the world of lighting is changing, which we know. And there in lighting, you could say there are three phases, three subsequent phases. So one, where we look at lighting not too long ago as offering lighting products, so looking at the efficiency of a light bulb, product content, and so forth. Next phase is where we look at how do the light generation components perform in their solution, including optics and ballast. And then thirdly, most importantly, how does lighting operate in its ecosystem, so cities, buildings, and the like. And this is really where the revolution is occurring. We are moving from analog to digital, from dumb to smart, from lamps to LEDs. But also in business models, we are moving from invoicing hardware to leasing lighting as a service, to financing, and so forth. So again, this provides a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy in the sector. If I compare to when I started working for Philips, then people thought, well, why don't you go work for the computer company or in the ICT industry? That was considered exciting. Well, I think working in the lighting sector on the LED revolution is probably one of the most exciting things, one of the most exciting areas where you can work or work with today. So lighting and the relevance of lighting and energy efficiency is also well recognized in the recently launched UN Sustainable Development Goals on September 25th of this year. The UN launched the 17 goals that are actually going to inspire and guide national governments in many of their policies in bringing the world on a more sustainable development track. And energy, and thereby lighting, is captured in Sustainable Development Goal 7, which you could also name Sustainable Energy for All, with a major role for energy efficiency. And although this is number 7, you could say 7 has a lot of interesting meanings in many cultures and religions, but then also the relevance of energy is so large that it impacts 7 or 8 of the other goals. So poverty eradication, cities, climate change, education, all those sustainable development goals are impacted and are, let's say, dependent for part of their success on energy and on lighting. Linked to that, early last year we co-founded a program under Sustainable Energy for All on doubling the rate of energy efficiency improvement. And here I should say that when we look at the global challenges that we just touched upon, that population growth, urbanization, and the rise of the middle class, that these result in an steady annual growth in energy demand of 3%. Whereas the rate of energy efficiency improvement of current society only improves by 1.5%. So we need to double the rate of energy efficiency improvement in order to stabilize the growth of global energy consumption, to stabilize the growth of global carbon emissions, and then from then on, do more efficiency and renewable energy to really start reducing the impact of energy on the quality of our living environment. And one of the important impacts of that is that it actually translates into accelerating renovation of the existing infrastructure, which for many other reasons is also a smart thing to do, and leapfrogging and emerging in developing countries to the best solutions around, like, for instance, solar LED street lighting in new cities in Africa, India, and China. So lighting is everywhere. It's so intrusive and so important for our lives that the connectivity that is now quickly growing is not only going to tackle those global challenges, but also is going to create even greater value as what lighting did for us in the past. And I'd like to finish off just by giving a few examples. One example is lighting in our homes. I've been in many debates on phasing out incandescent light bulbs, and some people felt the world's going under because that classical light bulb is disappearing. Well, today you hear nobody talking about that anymore, because with the dynamics and the versatility of LED lighting and the control, the power to control it over your smartphone or other smart devices that you have today, you can create any environment at home. And I've already seen lights, LED lights, where you can talk to. You can just say romantic or dinner, and the lighting changes. Well, this is really where we may forget about the fact that this is all efficient, but where we then see implicitly that energy efficiency is really going to be a lot of fun. Also the workplace. We spend most of our time in our workplaces. And here's an example of The Edge, a project in Amsterdam, the most energy smart building in the world at the moment. Where not only 80% of energy are saved, but through connected lighting and other building management technology, the costs are heavily reduced, but productivity of people is improved without having to work more hours. When we look at cities, you see here a picture of the Empire State Building. The Empire State Building, not only on the inside, but also on the outside, reduced its energy consumption significantly. And by moving to LED lighting, they reduced their energy consumption on the outside by 70%, and they can create any type of atmosphere, any type of experience that you would like. And I would suggest that just look at the YouTube video of Alicia Keys when she thinks New York, looking at the Empire State Building. So goosebumps guaranteed. Then moving to cities. Roads and streets, energy saving of 40% is what you probably would minimally achieve moving to LED lighting, and we see examples of up to 70 or sometimes 80%. And then knowing that half of a city's energy budget is lighting, then of course this is also for them an important motivation to move, as well as what we see in more and more cities in the world, that a city becomes safer, becomes more livable. People go out more often. In cities like where this is happening, like Buenos Aires, Madrid, and many, many more. We also see here an example of a tunnel where you can quickly recognize that when this tunnel was dark or badly lit, people were even afraid to walk through because they felt, okay, maybe I'm going to be victim of some crime. But now it's a beautiful tunnel, and not only then saving energy, but actually being there for what it's intended to. In the news, more and more cities that are taking leadership, so where our national leaders sometimes struggle to agree when they're all together on something that is in global common interest, we see that they're being helped now by the confidence and the actions that are building at subnational level. In this case, lighting again, New York switching, Kolkata, the whole of India, Sydney, London, you name them. So it is really, really accelerating. We can also see that on a world map, so it's hard to count the number of projects that are changing, but it's vast. Then also, as mentioned previously, connected lighting brings a number of important benefits, because instead of being unable to know what happens in terms of energy consumption, unable to manage your light points, the connected nature of lighting, with every light point having an IP address over the existing mains structure, so the existing voltage network, then suddenly you also leapfrog there from you could say maybe prehistory into what is really and what should be a 21st century ecosystem. And you can manage your lights, you can report how it operates, which is also an instant guarantee to the quality that is being promised to you as a city leadership. But not alone in existing urban environments, also rural environments, many of whom contain the 1.1 billion people that today don't have access to electricity and thereby don't have access to artificial lighting. Also there, quick progress is happening with community light centers, with solar LED lighting. Also those communities are accelerating their development. And there's still a huge task ahead of us, but I do believe that by sharing, by creating those projects, by sharing those examples, by engaging with many other partners in public and private environment, as well as in the financing community, we can now really change the 21st century into a century that is inclusive, that is based on sustainable development models, and that is there for everybody. So for all 7.5 and later on for all 9.5 billion. So in that sense, we see that where lighting is moving from evolution to revolution, the technology exists, there's no need to wait. Policy frameworks are being made, and by working together in sectors, we can help our national leaders and our global leaders to do just that. Financing models are quickly getting pace, and also by sharing, maybe even most importantly, how those practices we can replicate and we can scale, because there's nothing more powerful as people's voting and buying behavior. So in that sense, still a huge task ahead, but when we see the move from evolution to revolution, I'm actually convinced that the future can be as bright as the past, and even brighter so. So thank you very much.